It began subtly, just a shift in the air, a whisper of unease that lingered in the back of my mind. My wife, Emily, and I had been married for 8 years, building a life filled with routines and shared dreams. She was vibrant and charming, with a sharp wit that had captured my heart long ago. But over the past few months, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. Emily worked as an events coordinator, a job that kept her busy with planning weddings, corporate gatherings, and galas. Her unpredictable hours had always been a part of our lives, but lately, they seemed even more erratic. There were more late nights, more weekend commitments, and more vague explanations. "I'm meeting a client," she'd say, her tone breezy but her eyes avoiding mine. At first, I ignored it. She was ambitious, and her career meant everything to her. I didn't want to be the insecure husband who doubted his wife's dedication. But then, there were the missed calls, the hurried goodbyes, and the locked phone, a habit she had never practiced before. One evening, while Emily was out at a work dinner, I noticed her tablet lying on the couch. It buzzed, and without thinking, I glanced at the screen. A message preview appeared. "Looking forward to tomorrow. Can't wait to see you. Love." My heart dropped. The sender was labeled Event Client, but the tone of the message was anything but professional. My hands trembled as I stared at the words. My mind raced with questions. Was it just a misunderstanding? Was I reading too much into a text? Or was this the confirmation of my deepest fear? I decided not to confront her right away. Instead, I needed to know more. My gut told me that whatever Emily was hiding would unravel soon enough, and I would be there to catch the threads. For now, I had to pretend everything was normal, even though my heart felt like it was splitting in two. The days that followed felt like a cruel game of cat and mouse. I kept replaying the message in my mind, trying to decipher every word, every nuance. I told myself it could be innocent, just a misunderstanding, but deep down, I couldn't shake the sinking feeling. Emily's behavior only fueled my doubts. She had always been attentive, the kind of wife who would notice if I was upset or distracted. But lately, she seemed preoccupied, almost detached. When I asked her how her day had been, she gave me short, clipped responses. Busy, she'd say, or tiring. It wasn't like her. There was no warmth, no interest in our conversations. One evening, she came home late, her face flushed and her hair slightly disheveled. "Sorry, the meeting ran over," she said, dropping her purse on the kitchen counter. "I'm going to shower." She didn't wait for a response, disappearing upstairs before I could even say a word. As I cleaned up after dinner, I noticed her phone charging on the counter. It was locked, of course, but a new message popped up on the screen. This time, it read, "Tonight was amazing. I'll never forget it." The pit in my stomach deepened. My hands hovered over the phone. A part of me tempted to try her passcode. But no, I thought. If I wanted the truth, I needed something more definitive than a text. The next day, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I called my best friend, Mike, someone I trusted implicitly. "I need your help," I said, my voice heavy with emotion. "I think Emily's cheating on me." There was a long pause on the other end of the line before Mike responded. "Are you sure? That's a big accusation, man." "No," I admitted. "I'm not sure. But something's wrong, and I can't just ignore it." Mike was quiet for a moment before he said, "All right, let's figure this out. Do you want me to come over tonight?" "Not yet," I said. "I need to know more first." That evening, while Emily was out again, I went through our shared calendar. I wrote down every event, every meeting she claimed to have attended in the past few weeks. Then, I cross-referenced them with her credit card statements and the locations she'd been using for her Uber rides. The discrepancies were glaring. Meetings she said were at hotels turned out to be nowhere near her usual venues. Charges appeared for wine bars and restaurants we'd never been to together. My heart raced as I pieced it all together. It was no longer a whisper of doubt. It was a scream. Emily was lying to me. And whatever she was hiding, I was going to find out. That night, I barely slept. My mind replayed every moment I had spent with Emily over the past few months, searching for signs I might have missed. Had I been so blind? So naive? The woman I had trusted implicitly, the person I thought I knew better than anyone else, was becoming a stranger before my very eyes. The following morning, I decided it was time to dig deeper. Emily's routine was predictable. She left the house at 8 a.m. sharp and returned after dinner most nights. She said her current project was consuming her time. I let her explanation sit like a stone in my stomach. Today, though, I wasn't going to work. I told my boss I had food poisoning, and as soon as Emily left, I sprang into action. The first thing I did was check the GPS tracker I'd purchased online. It was a small, inconspicuous device that I had slipped into her car's glove compartment the night before. I opened the app and saw her location, downtown, near an upscale cafe. That was odd. Emily rarely had client meetings at cafes. Her usual spots were office buildings or formal venues. My pulse quickened as I grabbed my keys and headed out, determined to see for myself. By the time I reached the cafe, I was a bundle of nerves. I parked my car down the block and walked toward the entrance, keeping my distance. Sure enough, there she was, sitting at a table near the window. But she wasn't alone. Opposite her sat a man I didn't recognize. He was younger than me, probably in his early 30s, with an easy smile and a relaxed demeanor. Emily's face was alight with an expression I hadn't seen in months. Her eyes sparkled, and her laughter rang out like a melody. They leaned in close as they talked, their hands brushing lightly across the table. My stomach churned. I fought the urge to barge in and demand answers. Instead, I pulled out my phone and snapped a few photos. I needed proof, not just for myself but for whatever came next. As I watched them, I realized how comfortable they looked together, as if this wasn't their first meeting. How long had this been going on? Weeks? Months? The thought made my chest tighten. When they stood to leave, I ducked behind a corner, heart pounding. They exited together, walking side by side down the street. I followed at a safe distance, praying they wouldn't notice me. They arrived at a boutique hotel a few blocks away. Emily glanced around nervously before the man ushered her inside. My hands shook as I stood frozen on the sidewalk, the realization hitting me like a freight train. This wasn't just a fling. It was calculated, premeditated. She had planned this, lied to me about it, and chosen someone else over me. I stayed there for what felt like an eternity, staring at the hotel entrance. I had seen enough for now. The evidence was undeniable. My marriage was hanging by a thread, and it was time to decide how far I was willing to go to uncover the whole truth, and what I would do when I finally confronted her. I drove home in a haze, the weight of what I'd seen bearing down on me. My mind raced with questions. How long had this been going on? Why hadn't I seen the signs sooner? What had I done, or not done, to push her into someone else's arms? By the time I pulled into the driveway, my anger had boiled over. The woman I had built a life with, the person I had loved unconditionally, was betraying me, and she thought I didn't know. As I sat in the car, gripping the steering wheel, I knew I couldn't confront her yet, not without a plan. If I wanted answers, I had to approach this carefully. Confronting her too soon could drive her deeper into secrecy. I needed her to admit the truth, to see the guilt in her eyes when she realized I knew everything. That was when it hit me. I had to bait her into revealing the affair herself. When Emily came home that evening, she was her usual composed self. She kissed my cheek, her lips warm against my skin, and asked about my day. "Same old," I said, forcing a smile. "How was yours?" She shrugged. "Busy as always. These clients are running me ragged." Her tone was light, casual, but I couldn't help noticing the faint tension in her smile. She was lying to my face, and it stung. "Maybe we should plan a getaway," I suggested. "Just the two of us. You've been working so hard lately, and I think we could use some time to reconnect." Her eyes widened for a moment before she quickly masked her surprise. "That sounds amazing," she said, though her voice lacked conviction. "Let me check my schedule and get back to you." I nodded, pretending to buy her excuse. Inside, my suspicions grew. She wouldn't commit because she was juggling her lies, trying to ensure her affair didn't interfere with her carefully curated alibi. That night, while she showered, I accessed her phone again. She had changed her passcode, but I had already memorized her pattern from previous glances. I opened her messages, scrolling through the thread with the man I'd seen at the cafe. His name was Andrew, and their exchanges were as damning as I had feared. Can't stop thinking about today. Neither can I. You're incredible. When can we steal another moment? The messages painted a vivid picture of their relationship. It wasn't just physical. There was an emotional connection between them, something that cut deeper than any affair of convenience. The betrayal wasn't just of the body. It was of the heart. I took screenshots of the messages and emailed them to myself, my hands shaking as I pressed send. It felt like a line had been crossed, and there was no turning back. She was asleep when I returned to the bedroom, her face serene, as if she hadn't torn our life apart. Lying beside her, I stared at the ceiling, my heart heavy with the weight of what was to come. Tomorrow, I would begin setting the stage for the confrontation, and when it came, I would make sure she couldn't deny what she had done. The next morning, Emily was unusually cheerful, humming to herself as she prepared breakfast. She moved around the kitchen with the same ease and confidence I had fallen in love with years ago. But now, every action felt rehearsed, like she was playing a part she perfected. It was a facade, one I was determined to break. "I've been thinking about that getaway," I said as I poured myself a cup of coffee. "We could drive up to the cabin this weekend. Just you and me." Emily paused, her back to me. For a moment, she didn't say anything. Then she turned, her smile forced. "That sounds amazing, but this weekend is tricky. I've got a client meeting on Saturday that I can't reschedule." I raised an eyebrow, pretending to be disappointed. "Another meeting? You've been working so hard lately. Can't you take a break?" "I wish I could," she said quickly. "This client's really demanding. But maybe next weekend?" Her deflection was expected, but still infuriating. "Sure," I said with a smile. "Next weekend it is." Later that day, while Emily was at work, I called Mike. "It's worse than I thought," I said, pacing the living room. "She's not just cheating. She's lying to my face every single day." Mike sighed on the other end. "What's the plan? Are you going to confront her?" "Not yet," I replied. "I need more. If I go in without proof, she'll deny everything. I want her to admit it, to see the truth in her eyes when she realizes she can't lie anymore." Mike was quiet for a moment. "Do you want me to come with you? Maybe we can tail her, catch her in the act." "No," I said firmly. "This is something I need to do on my own." That evening, I waited until Emily was asleep before slipping out of bed. I grabbed the spare key to her car and quietly made my way to the driveway. I opened the glove compartment and retrieved the GPS tracker. Back inside, I synced the data to my laptop. As the locations populated on the map, my suspicions were confirmed. Over the past 2 weeks, she had been frequenting the boutique hotel I had seen her enter with Andrew. The timestamps aligned perfectly with her late-night meetings and client dinners. I clenched my fists, anger coursing through me. It was one thing to suspect, but seeing the cold, hard evidence made it real in a way I wasn't prepared for. The next day, I decided to test her. During lunch, I texted her, "Thinking about surprising you at work. Maybe we can grab lunch together?" Her response came quickly. "I'd love that, but I'm swamped today. Maybe tomorrow?" A lie. I knew she wasn't at the office. I checked the GPS app and saw her car parked near the same cafe where I'd seen her with Andrew. My chest tightened as I stared at the screen. The cracks in her mask were starting to show, and it was only a matter of time before the whole thing shattered. I just had to be patient. The following day, I felt like a man on the edge, teetering between anger and heartbreak. Every glance at Emily, every word she spoke, felt like a dagger twisting deeper. She didn't know I was onto her, and her composure was infuriatingly intact. I clung to my resolve, knowing the truth was steadily coming into focus. After she left for work, I reviewed the GPS data again. Her usual routine had shifted. The hotel visits were more frequent, and there were gaps in her schedule that couldn't be explained by work. My gut told me today would be the day I uncovered everything. I decided to follow her. It felt desperate, but I was beyond caring about appearances. Around lunchtime, I drove to the cafe where she and Andrew often met. Parking a safe distance away, I watched from my car, my heart pounding with anticipation. Sure enough, Emily arrived a few minutes later, stepping out of her car with an easy grace that felt like a mockery of the turmoil inside me. She wasn't alone for long. Andrew appeared from across the street, flashing her a smile that made my blood boil. They embraced briefly, just long enough for it to sting. They didn't linger at the cafe this time. After a short conversation, they got into Andrew's car and drove off. I followed, keeping several cars behind to avoid suspicion. My palms were sweaty on the wheel as I trailed them through downtown traffic. They eventually stopped at the boutique hotel. Watching them enter together, laughing as though they didn't have a care in the world, was like a punch to the gut. I parked down the street and debated my next move. Barging in crossed my mind more than once, but I forced myself to stay calm. I had come this far. I needed to think strategically. Instead, I snapped a few photos of them entering the hotel and noted the time. This evidence was piling up, each piece more damning than the last. While I waited, I did something I hadn't allowed myself to do yet. I thought about what came next. What would I say when I confronted her? How could I look her in the eye and listen to her excuses without breaking? And if she denied it, if she tried to twist the truth, what would I do then? I stayed parked for over an hour, my emotions swinging wildly between rage and despair. When Emily and Andrew finally emerged, they looked as composed as when they'd gone in. My stomach turned as I watched them kiss briefly before parting ways. Emily drove off in her car, and I stayed behind, frozen by the weight of what I'd just witnessed. That night, I didn't say much to her. She acted like everything was normal, even laughing at some silly TV show we were watching. I nodded and smiled, pretending I wasn't dying inside. But I was closer than ever to confronting her, and this time, I wouldn't hold back. The night after seeing Emily with Andrew was the hardest yet. Every small gesture she made, a casual touch on my arm, a soft kiss on the cheek, felt like a cruel joke. She was playing the role of the devoted wife, but her betrayal had turned every interaction into a mockery of what we once were. I barely slept, my mind racing as I pieced together my plan. By morning, I was resolved. Confronting her in a fit of anger wouldn't give me the answers I needed, and it certainly wouldn't let her feel the full weight of what she'd done. If she wanted to lie, I would let her walk right into her own trap. I decided to start the day as if nothing was wrong. Over breakfast, I brought up the cabin getaway again. I was thinking we could head out Friday evening, I said, casually sipping my coffee. You've been working so hard. I think it'll be good for us. Emily hesitated, her fork pausing mid-air. I told you, this weekend is tricky, she replied, her tone almost apologetic. That client meeting on Saturday is really important. I feigned a sigh, shaking my head with a smile. I guess I'll just have to be patient then. But next weekend, no excuses, okay? She laughed lightly, relieved, and agreed. I watched her closely, noting the small flicker of guilt in her eyes. She was good at hiding it, but not perfect. Not anymore. After she left for work, I finalized my preparations. I had already installed a discreet camera in her car the night before, hidden in a compartment she rarely used. It would capture audio and video, giving me insight into her conversations and activities. I also set up a GPS tracker app on her phone while she showered that morning. It synced with my laptop, giving me a live feed of her movements. Later that afternoon, the tracker pinged her location. Once again at the boutique hotel, my stomach churned as I opened the camera feed from her car. It showed her sitting in the driver's seat, texting. The audio picked up her soft laughter and a voice message from Andrew. Can't wait to see you. Room 205, as usual. The rage boiled in me, but I forced myself to remain calm. I recorded the message and saved it alongside the photos and timestamps I had already collected. It was damning evidence, but I needed more. I wanted to confront her in a way that left no room for lies or manipulation. When Emily came home that evening, I acted like nothing was amiss. I cooked her favorite meal, poured her a glass of wine, and even joked about the silly things I'd seen online that day. She seemed relaxed, even affectionate. But behind her calm demeanor, I could see the cracks beginning to form. As she drifted off to sleep beside me, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The pieces of the puzzle were coming together. Soon, the day of reckoning would arrive, and when it did, I would make sure she couldn't deny a single thing. The days leading up to the confrontation felt like a blur of tension and calculation. Every moment with Emily was a test of my composure. I had to act as though nothing had changed while knowing full well our marriage was crumbling beneath the surface. Every smile I forced, every casual comment I made, felt like a betrayal of my own pain. But I knew I couldn't lose focus now. On Wednesday evening, Emily announced she had another late-night meeting. I nodded, offering a supportive smile. "Work's been keeping you so busy lately. Don't push yourself too hard," I said, knowing exactly where she would be and who she would be with. After she left, I wasted no time. I checked the live feed from the camera in her car, confirming her destination. It didn't surprise me to see her heading straight for the boutique hotel. The GPS tracker on her phone placed her there as well, the signal unwavering. I captured a screenshot of the data, adding it to my growing collection of evidence. This time, I decided to go a step further. I drove to the hotel, parking in a lot across the street where I could remain inconspicuous. I waited, watching from the shadows as Emily and Andrew exited the car together. They didn't hold hands or act overtly affectionate. It seemed they were trying to be discreet, but their body language betrayed them. The ease with which they moved together, the soft smile on her face, and the way he touched her back as they walked toward the entrance spoke volumes. I followed them into the hotel, keeping a safe distance. They stopped at the front desk, where Andrew checked in while Emily lingered nearby, glancing around nervously. My heart pounded as I watched them take the elevator to the second floor. I noted the room number, 205, and waited a few minutes before heading to the desk myself. Feigning casual interest, I struck up a conversation with the clerk. "I'm meeting a friend who just checked in," I said, slipping her a tip. "Can you remind me of the room number?" She hesitated, her professionalism warring with the bribe, but the cash won out. "Room 205, she said quietly. "Thanks," I replied, masking my turmoil with a polite smile. I took the stairs to the second floor, my pulse quickening with every step. When I reached their room, I stood outside the door, listening. Faint laughter and muffled voices reached me, followed by a soft moan that sent a wave of fury through my chest. I gritted my teeth, fighting the urge to burst in. Instead, I pulled out my phone, recording the door, the room number, and the sounds emanating from inside. It was painful to listen, but I needed every shred of evidence. Satisfied that I had enough, I left the hotel. Driving home, I replayed the recording, each sound solidifying my resolve. The time for gathering proof was over. I had everything I needed. The confrontation was no longer a question of if, it was a question of when. Thursday morning arrived with an eerie calm. The house was quiet, and Emily moved through her morning routine as if nothing was amiss. She kissed me on the cheek before heading out the door, leaving behind a faint trail of her favorite perfume. I watched her drive away, my heart heavy but resolute. Today would be the last day she'd walk out of this house believing her lies were intact. I spent the morning reviewing everything I had collected: photos, recordings, screenshots, timestamps. It was all there, a damning tapestry of betrayal. Yet, as I stared at the evidence, a small part of me hoped I was wrong, that there was some explanation, some thread of our life together still unbroken. But the facts were undeniable, and the woman I thought I knew was a stranger now. I called Mike. "It's happening tonight," I told him, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "I have everything I need." Mike hesitated on the other end. "Are you sure you want to do this? Once you open that door, there's no going back." "There's nothing to go back to," I replied. "I've spent the last few weeks uncovering the truth. Now, it's time for her to face it." Mike sighed. "All right. You know I've got your back. Just don't lose yourself in this, okay? No matter what happens, you're better than this mess." I appreciated his words, but they felt distant. My focus was razor-sharp. After the call, I set about preparing the house. I printed copies of the photos and transcripts of her messages with Andrew, placing them in a neat folder. I loaded the recordings onto a tablet and tested the audio to ensure it was clear. Every step felt clinical, like assembling the pieces of a courtroom exhibit. By late afternoon, I was ready. I paced the living room, rehearsing what I would say. Should I be angry? Calm? Should I give her a chance to explain? Or should I lay it all out and watch her squirm under the weight of her deceit? The questions circled endlessly, each scenario more draining than the last. As the hours ticked by, my anticipation grew. Emily texted around 6 o'clock, saying she'd be working late again. I replied with a simple, "Take your time. I'll be here when you get home." The irony wasn't lost on me. When she finally walked through the door at 9:30, I was sitting in the living room, the folder and tablet on the coffee table before me. She looked tired but managed to smile. "Long day," she said, slipping off her shoes. "I'm going to shower." "Emily," I interrupted, my voice calm but firm. "Sit down." She froze, her eyes darting to the coffee table. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice tinged with suspicion. I gestured to the seat across from me. "We need to talk." Her smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of unease. Slowly, she lowered herself into the chair. I leaned forward, meeting her gaze. "I know," I said simply, "about everything." The storm was about to break, and there was no turning back now. Emily's face went pale at my words, her forced composure cracking like thin ice. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice shaky. She tried to sound confused, but I could see the fear in her eyes. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I picked up the folder and slid it across the table toward her. "Look for yourself," I said, leaning back, my expression unreadable. She hesitated before opening it, her hands trembling. The first page was a photo of her and Andrew at the cafe. The next showed them entering the boutique hotel. Then came screenshots of their messages, each more incriminating than the last. Her lips parted as if to say something, but no words came out. Finally, I played the audio recording from outside the hotel room, the muffled sounds echoing through the room. Tears welled in her eyes as she stared at the evidence, her breath quickening. "It's not what it looks like," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. I couldn't help but laugh, a cold, bitter sound. "Not what it looks like? Then explain it to me, Emily. Tell me what I've been seeing for weeks now." She looked down, her shoulders slumping as if the weight of her lies was crushing her. I didn't mean for it to happen," she began, tears streaming down her face. "It was just a mistake." "Don't insult me," I snapped, my calm demeanor finally breaking. "This wasn't a mistake, Emily. Mistakes don't last for months. Mistakes don't involve secret hotel rooms and late-night meetings." She sobbed, burying her face in her hands. "I was lonely," she cried. "You've been so distant, and I didn't know how to reach you anymore." I stared at her, stunned by her audacity. "So this is my fault?" I asked, my voice rising. "You're blaming me for your betrayal?" "No," she said quickly, shaking her head. "I'm not blaming you. I didn't know how else to fill the void." "Did you ever think about talking to me?" I shot back. "Did you ever consider trying to fix what was broken instead of running to someone else?" She didn't answer, and the silence that followed was deafening. I felt the anger draining out of me, replaced by a deep, aching sadness. "You didn't just betray me, Emily," I said quietly. "You betrayed everything we built together. You made me doubt everything about us." Emily pleaded for forgiveness, swearing she'd end things with Andrew and do whatever it took to repair our marriage. But her words felt hollow, her tears insincere. I told her I needed time to think, though in my heart, I already knew there was no salvaging what we'd had. Over the next few days, I began laying the groundwork for what came next. I met with a lawyer to discuss divorce proceedings, ensuring I had all the evidence I needed to protect myself. I also reached out to Mike, who offered his unwavering support. "Whatever you need, man," he said. "You're not going through this alone." At home, I pretended to consider Emily's apologies. She became overly attentive, cooking elaborate meals, showering me with affection, and deleting Andrew's number from her phone. All gestures that felt too little, too late. I played along, giving her just enough hope to keep her from suspecting my true intentions. Behind the scenes, I began crafting my revenge. I wasn't interested in petty acts of vengeance. I wanted her to feel the full weight of her choices. And I knew exactly how to make that happen. On a crisp Friday morning, I executed the first phase of my plan. I had discovered that Andrew was married, and his wife, Clara, had no idea about the affair. Armed with my evidence, I mailed an anonymous package to her, detailing her husband's infidelity. It was a calculated move, one that would create chaos in Emily and Andrew's carefully constructed fantasy. By Saturday evening, the fallout had begun. Emily received a frantic call from Andrew, his voice panicked and angry. I listened from the next room as she tried to calm him down, her own fear evident. "We'll figure it out," she said desperately. "Just don't do anything rash." The cracks in her facade were widening, and I felt a grim satisfaction watching her struggle to hold it together. Sunday night, I made my move. While Emily was out, I packed my bags and left a letter on the kitchen table. It was short and to the point. "I can't live with someone I can't trust. Consider this my goodbye." I stayed with Mike for the night, ignoring Emily's frantic calls and texts. When she finally showed up at his door, I refused to see her. "You made your choices," I told her through the door. "Now you can live with them." The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of legal proceedings and emotional turmoil. Emily tried to reconcile, but I remained firm. Our divorce was finalized within months, leaving her to face the consequences of her actions. Andrew's marriage had also fallen apart, and the life they had built on lies crumbled around them. Though the pain lingered, I found solace in rebuilding my life. With Mike's support and the clarity that came from leaving a toxic relationship, I began to heal. Emily's betrayal had broken me, but it hadn't destroyed me. In time, I realized that my future was brighter without her, and that sometimes the only way to truly move forward is to let go of what no longer serves you.